Hi everyone, welcome to Spark Spread. So yesterday we found out that Tesla will not be immediately releasing vehicle-to-grid technology, although it is in their roadmap. Despite this, they did say that they still plan on offering some sort of energy market participation. So I want to dive into what that means and how Tesla can offer a service like that without pushing energy onto the grid. So, for a little background, grid operators are required to ensure that there is enough generating capacity to meet the maximum potential demand on the grid. So if you think of the event we had in California a week or two ago, where the temperatures were 110, 115 degrees, everybody was using their air conditioning. Basically, every available generating resource had to produce electricity in order to meet that very elevated level of demand. So historically, meeting this maximum level of demand has been done by installing what are called peaker power plants. These are very energy inefficient machines, but they're cheap to build and they'll only run a handful of hours during the year when the power prices are very high because demand is so high. However, about a decade or so ago, utilities started to realize that a cheaper way of balancing demand and supply was to actually lower demand rather than build new supply in the form of peaker plants. So this was around the time that utilities started installing smart meters on customers' homes. So these are electrical meters that measure the output of customer homes. But if you paired them with a control on a customer's air conditioning unit, you could actually have the utility send a signal through the smart meter to the air conditioning unit to turn off power for a set amount of time in order to lower the overall demand on the grid. This reduced demand was actually recognized by utilities and by grid operators as a new form of supply. It was called demand response. So rather than build an expensive and inefficient new peaker plant, you could simply lower the demand during those rare grid events where demand was through the roof, turn off a couple air conditioning units for 20 minutes or so. The customer doesn't really notice the impact. I suspect Tesla will be pursuing something similar here when they talk about energy market participation, when we know that they will not be pushing energy actually out onto the grid. So in essence, Tesla will have access to hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of Tesla vehicles, all of which will be charging at various times and creating a decent amount of load or demand on the grid. If customers allow Tesla to have some control over when those vehicles are charging, or potentially even granting Tesla the authority to interrupt charging during extreme grid events, Tesla will be able to show to grid operators that it also has a form of demand response and can therefore qualify for capacity payments. So the timing of this is really interesting because just last week, FERC, or the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, which is the national body that oversees electric regulations in the United States, announced a new order, FERC Order 2222, which is a landmark order which is basically allowing for distributed energy resource aggregators to have participation in wholesale electric markets. So this FERC order opens the door for Tesla and companies like Tesla, which will be aggregating a lot of distributed energy resources together. It does pave the way for companies like that to participate in wholesale markets. And essentially all that means is that Tesla will be able to aggregate these resources, prove to the grid operators that they can reduce demand, and thereby qualify for capacity payments. I suspect this will take a little bit of time to get widespread regulatory approval, maybe a year or two. But then the really interesting thing is down the road, by that time, Tesla will have introduced its vehicle-to-grid capability and will potentially be able to pursue harder to quantify benefits like pushing energy actually out onto the grid. So that does it for today's episode. I hope this was helpful, and please hit like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time on Spark Spread.